Good after... No, it's after 5. It's good evening. Driving home. Just had some thoughts, you know. That's like the whole point of this channel. Why are you... If you're not here for my thoughts, then why the fuck are you here? First of all. So, put out that other video about the 40k D&D game, which Shadow in the Warp. What's the acronym? How do you pronounce the acronym? SHITW? SHIT. It's SHitW. SHitW. Okay, for our SHitW game. So, something I noticed, we've got some but we've got some disparity in damage. And there's two reasons for it. One, it's the way the characters are built, and it's kind of what the different weapon sets kind of let you do. I touched on it in the last video, but like generally the highest damage is like the 2-weapon fighting / monk style, because if you're applying like flame tongues to 2-weapon fighting, then the damage is pretty high. Same thing if you're applying flame tongue to a monk. And there's another 2 reasons for that. First is for the SHitW version of the monk, the augment assist. Instead of martial arts and unarmed strikes, it's just you basically just have monk weapons. You have integrated weapons, as they're called, which are part of your body as far as the narrative is concerned, but I only really care about the mechanics in as far as this discussion is. Basically, you can do everything a monk can do, but you don't have to use unarmed strike for your flurry of blows or martial arts attack. You can just use your integrated weapons, which means if you have a weapon that does an extra 2d6 damage on a hit, guess what? You now have 4 attacks with an extra 7 average damage per hit, which roughly equals out to around 80 damage on average if everything hits, which I don't care as much about factoring in whether things are going to hit or not. And likewise, 2-weapon fighting kind of results in the same thing, because the way we rule it is if you're engaged in 2-weapon fighting and both your weapons are light, you have the fighting style, some sort of investment, then not only is the offhand attack part of your attack action, but extra attack applies to it, which does keep it in line normally. I quote normally. It's 2-weapon fighting is more powerful in tier 1 of 5e play, but as soon as you get extra attack, it falls off, and it's still theoretically 50% more, but blah blah blah. Not going to get into that too much. So as a result, the 2 of the characters have damage output around 80 average. It's actually in the 70s because I factored in the like Hunter's Mark style boost that my ranger gets. But not the point. It's been a day. That's always a day. And the monk will do a little less, but I think there's some other stuff they can do. It's not important. So the other characters are a class called a Crusader, which is basically just, it's a martial with some stuff, but they don't get more than extra attack 1. They only get 1 extra attack, and they have I think what are called Valor dice, and they can apply those either when they land an attack, or if I think they can use a bonus action to let another teammate make an attack as a reaction. So like Warlord stuff, 4e Warlord stuff, and they can apply a Valor dice to that. So they're kind of like a pool of like mini smites almost. There's other things you can do with them, and they scale up from a d6 to d8, blah blah blah. So you have a limited amount of them, but you can apply them in a lot of different ways and do stuff with them. So there's a damage boost there, but it's not huge, and it's not. I mean, the Hunter's Mark thing is it's a resource, so that's not super consistent. But so that character has a damage output. I think I calculated it at like high 40s, because they've got a +5 in strength mod. They've got just a long sword, so 44.5 +5, and I think it's a magic weapon, like, or it's +1, +7, and then like I think the Valor die is a D8 right now, so another 4.5 times 2, and that's like in the 40s somewhere. I think it's like 49. I don't know. I didn't look at it. So it's like 49-ish. Maybe it's low for, I don't remember. Not important. So that guy's damage output is like half of anybody else's damage output. And there's a reason for that. He's built as more of like this tank style. He's also using a shield, which the shield does a lot for this character in this game. It's both a big defense boost, and the shield he has specifically gives him resistance to ranged attacks. So any damage from a ranged weapon, half damage, just automatically, which is really cool. And that's kind of the point of this character. He's not there to do the most damage. He's there to like aid and abet his teammates. I like that terminology. And then the other one's a Psyker, who's a caster, the 40k wizard, and that has its own wibbliness, which I'm not going to get into that either. So it got me thinking, like, we're only playing 4 of the however many classes there are. And I was thinking about it, like, what would all the, like, what about some of the other classes that nobody's playing? Like I think the most unchanged from base 5e are the Barbarian, Fighter, and Rogue, which have been renamed in the system to Berserker, Soldier, and Renegade, which, nice flavorful name changes. But while they have slightly changed up subclasses, I think except for the Soldier. So the Fighter/Soldier is just 5e Fighter with Champion and Battlemaster. That's all it is. You can use other subclasses, but almost essentially, and the Rogue is the same way. It just has Assassin and Thief. So it kind of got me thinking, like, what would how would those other classes fare? And you kind of know how Barbarian, Berserker would work. Fighter, we're not at level 11 yet, so depending on the weapon sets, all these martials would behave the way you would expect. Berserker would need, like, if you were going to do 2-weapon fighting Berserker, which would be probably the most damage you could possibly get, then that would be like, you need to get a fighting style somewhere, so either a feat or a 1-level dip, however you want to do it, which if you roll really good stats, then yeah, you could give up a feat for that. Especially if you're going to do 2-weapon fighting, then there's no other feats that would really boost it more. Like there's Dual Wielder, but nobody gives a shit about Dual Wielder, because it's just not good. But not the point. So, Barbarian is like Berserker, it's simple, Fighter is simple, but I was wondering exactly how Renegade would like kind of play out. Like, how would their damage be? And did a little math, and it's like with factoring in like the Flame Tongue that almost every weapon is essentially, that gets an extra 2d6 damage. The sneak attack boost is like roughly equivalent to a second attack with Flame Tongue, depending on where you are in what tier you're at. Like where we are at level 8, it's like roughly equivalent. Like There's other reasons why it's maybe not as strong, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. But, you know, you could always argue that, you know, a Renegade would be hitting more often anyway. There's other things they could do. And also, as always, as long as you're just, like, functional in combat, like, you don't have to be doing the most damage. As long as you're contributing and your character isn't going down all the time and it's, like, it's functional, it's doing something, you don't have to do the most damage. It's not that important. But, yeah, I found a sneak attack is, like, roughly equivalent. So they're doing, like, it's maybe like 6 or 7 damage behind that Crusader that I mentioned, because it was like high 30s, low 40s ish, depending on some things you can tweak, like what kind of damage it is, what kind of weapon you've got, exactly, blah blah. But I was thinking, theoretically, you know, that Crusader isn't really going to be getting more damage as they go on. Essentially, this is all the damage they're going to be doing. Like, yeah, their Valor die steps up a little bit. And it's kind of true for all the other characters as well. Like, for my Courser, the Ranger, his target lock damage will scale up a little bit. It'll go from a D6 to a D8 at level 9. And then I think at level, like, 17, it goes to a D10. Woo! +1 average damage on each hit. Wow. When we get to level 9, my average damage will go from 84 to 88. That's a big jump, man. Like, it's not. And, you know, damage doesn't have to scale crazily. I do kind of feel like maybe it should scale slower in some ways. Like, maybe the 2-weapon fighting thing, maybe extra attack only applies at level 11. Maybe. But even then, like, fighter kind of fucks the whole thing up. So, I don't know. But that's a separate argument, talking about, like, what, you know, how damage should scale exactly, because Renegade will continue to scale. And especially for marshals, like, really, the characters are always going to be more dependent on magic items and what the DM hands out for their damage than, like, purely on their class. Like, you know, if you build a marshal that has a big old weapon, yeah, you can grab Great Weapon Master. You could grab that early, you could grab it late. It's always going to be a damage increase. But it's not like it's tied to higher levels. So it's not something you have to wait to get. Unless, I do like the newer version of Great Weapon Master. As much as, you know, power attack is like an iconic thing, it kind of, at least in 5e, it really over-centralizes the design. So I like the new design in the 2024 books for that feat specifically. Like, power attack makes much more sense in, like, 3rd edition derived systems, you know, like 3.5 and Pathfinder. It makes more sense in those kinds of systems. But that's the point. Really, it's just marshals are always going to be more dependent on magic items, and, you know, a good DM can always, like, kind of keep their eye on their character's damage output and be like, oh, that character's falling behind. They're not really doing that much damage as much. Like, they're not getting those, how do you want to do this, anything like that. They're just not getting it as much. So maybe I'll give them some more damage soon. Like, so, you know, and that could be anything. Like, the characters get their hands on some unique piece of gear that does, you know, that changes their damage output in some way, whether it's like some new weapons or like some sort of charm or talisman or whatever that, you know, passively increases their damage in some way, or, you know, there's a million ways to do it. I'm not going to talk about it here, but something like the rogue does kind of grow more evenly. So, you know, it's just one of those things. But I was actually a little surprised to find that the Renegade is like, they're doing okay damage. Like, it's not amazing. Like, they're not going to be out damaging any of the marshals that are built for like pure damage, but it'll always be worth it for them to like throw out an attack and get a sneak attack. Like, that's kind of the idea. And you know, they're not, but if you wanted, if I were playing a Renegade and I specifically kind of wanted to be like this one-shot assassin type of character without like using multiple attacks, that's something I could talk to the DM about. Be like, hey, this is kind of the idea for the character. There's no like weapons or gear or anything like that seem to hit that fantasy or hit that capability. Is there something we could whip up that could do that? You know, like whether it's a weapon that changes all your sneak attack dice from D6s to D12s, or just doubles your sneak attack dice, or you know, whatever it is. There's ways you can do that. It just depends on like what the DM is willing to do and what they can handle and what the player really wants. Well, that's kind of all I have on this idea today. That's all I got for you.